Change is a normal part of life. You might be moving home, ending a relationship, or starting a new career.
We are all going to go through change at some point in our life. It is inevitable. And sometimes it's very unfortunate, sometimes it's wonderful. It's, as if we are labeling things negative or positive, we typically want to avoid the negative and we want to hold on to the positive. But each can be accompanied by feelings of stress and can be challenging. So it's important to think about what works for me. How can I move through this? And do I need some extra help? And it's really okay to ask for extra help.
What balance is really is ourselves, and you'll be able to identify that far better than I ever will be able to. But you know you, and when we are balanced, we're ourselves, and we can identify with that. And as we move away from balance, we know that we may not be in our own skin today, and we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about how sometimes change can affect how we feel balanced and how far or close we feel to balance. I think that's something that we all experience probably day to day. And there are points in our life where we're distressed or we feel stress. And as I say, that's just like change, it's a normal part of living. Mental health issues can be grief, longer term stress, and the change that we're going to be talking about in more detail as we go through the presentation. And mental illness is really moving into things like paranoia, hallucinations, or things that we may have heard before. We're not going to be able to identify them without professional clinical support.
So how can we care for ourselves as we move through change? We're really important. And it is important that we spend time thinking about what will make me feel well.
We can ask a couple of questions. I think the first one, and all these questions are questions that we can ask ourselves, or questions that we can ask our communities and our family. And so the first one might be, how long have I been away from myself? Or how long have I been away from balance? Because that's important for us, because sometimes, you know what, we may be away for a few days, a few weeks, and that may be normal to us. But when we really truly look back at when that change happened, and if our behaviours and our balance has been different for quite a long time, we may realise that it really is going beyond and that we need to get to the next step and we need to maybe reach out for help.
It's important to think about what makes you feel balanced and when do you feel most well, and then to engage in activities as you can in a reasonable manner that works for you. The other reason we really promote self-care and encourage that is because you can't really be an effective carer for other people if you're not well yourself. And so that is absolutely necessary if you are wanting to also support your loved ones or your community as a whole going through a major change.
So the first thing we have to do really is talk about who loved ones actually are and how they are different from other people that we meet in our lives. You can identify them perhaps as family members, your granny, your granddad, your mum, your dad, your own children, aunties, uncles, but it means more for other people as well, friends, neighbours, people that you feel close to and that you're going to be able to identify a change with them. When we see someone on a long-term basis every day in and out, that can be one of the challenges we have when we're looking at change in them. I think you can maybe think back as an example when you might notice that someone's lost a lot of weight, and perhaps you don't realise that change when you see them every day after work at 5:30 because it's only little changes. But if you don't see that person for a long time, it can be a real shock and surprise when finally the penny drops for you and you see that that person really has changed. It's important when we're talking to our family to realise that we're all individuals, and that can be difficult in a family sometimes. So understanding that when we talk to them or talk to our loved ones, that it's our perception of what's happening to them. So some of the tips and things that we can talk about is paying attention to things like body language and our tone of voice, allowing for a time where maybe it's just you and them, we turn off the cell phones, the telly's off, and we have an opportunity just to speak on a one-on-one basis. And it can be as simple as saying something like, I've noticed that you haven't been spending as much time with the family recently, and I'm wondering if everything is okay. So when you listen to that statement, you know that it's personalised, it comes from you, and it's not judging or pointing out, saying that there's stuff that they haven't done or they have done. It's your realisation and it's your perception.
Our community is, of course, our physical community, so where we live, our neighbours are part of a community, and we often, when we use that word, that's often what we think. But we live and work in a bunch of different communities. So our colleagues and our workplace is a community, the sports teams, the hobbies that we engage with, the volunteer activities and the associations we belong to, and our acquaintances. The relationships that we have with people in communities are quite different from the relationships that we have with friends and family. They're not going to necessarily be as in-depth. And sometimes actually, when we're outside of a situation, we don't see someone as often, we are able to notice change in them actually more dramatically.
When we're looking for warning signs and things like that, we can ask a couple of questions.
Is the person looking as rested as they were before? Is their mood the same? Are they as gregarious as they used to be? What's their attitude to the activity they're doing? How flexible and adaptable to change are they? And so really what you're looking for is any change from your baseline. And your baseline with that person is the first time you've met them. It's about asking, not sweeping something under the rug, not waiting. And if you know someone has gone through a divorce or has a really sick child or an aging parent, as many people do, ask. See how they're doing. We don't always have to have all the answers. I think that sometimes stops us from asking people if they need help because we're scared of the fact that we may not be able to solve it for them right in the spot. In most cases, we actually really don't want you to solve it on the spot. You can be someone they can connect with and chat with, but also to let them know about what are the resources available in the community. As you start to think about helping and supporting others, whether they be your loved ones, whether that includes your friends and your family, or your neighbor, or someone on your sports team, you have to think about what's appropriate for the relationship I have with this person. When is it too much? When is it too little, maybe? Can I do more? And so it's really important to think about how much is enough and committing to what I actually can do.
And the other thing as well is setting boundaries and staying age appropriate. I can even talk to my own. I don't think my mum is ever going to realise that I ever went beyond the age of 13. And so we've got to know that for some of the people that we talk with as well, is that respecting and realising that how they communicate and how they want to communicate. So managing our expectations as well is kind of part of that.
It doesn't always have to be you to make that call, because sometimes it may be too much. It may be going past our boundaries. If you do approach someone, really try to approach from a place of genuine care and concern.
The last question really that we can ask is, am I worried about the future? Do I not feel like I'm in a place right now where things are going to get better? Because that can really help us conclude and identify that it's maybe time to really go beyond and start sourcing help. You can go to your family doctor if you're not in a crisis, as if you would with any other kind of illness, physical issue, or any kind of health worry. You can also talk to a counsellor. We have counsellors here that are free, but also can be provided through your workplace benefits. And there are also action numbers and lines that you can call. So things we might be looking for when we're talking about crisis is things like suicidal feelings, inappropriate emotional displays, something that's really vastly out of the ordinary for that person that you know or are in touch with in the community. They might be hearing or seeing things that you don't believe are there, and they might believe that they're being perhaps watched or followed, and that their feelings and thoughts may be being influenced by others. And when you start to see some of these markers or these flags, it's really important to you can share your feelings and your fears potentially with that person, but that the resources they might be accessing can be different. And we have crisis lines that they can call, such as a distress centre, and that there's also hospitals and urgent care who work on larger scales and small scales for that person. And you know the person you know well, and that's why you're taking them to that support or service. You'll know how that person will react going to a larger hospital versus a small town or a small urgent care support service. And depending on the city you live in, there may be some community crisis services that can come and visit you in your town.